Hi, I'm Dennis Phillips, and welcome to Everyday Reloading and Shooting. All right, I've been going kind of crazy since I got this Garmin Xero C1 Pro chronograph, but it has actually opened up a whole new world for me as far as my shooting goes. So a few weeks ago, I ran this test where I have several head stamps of brass, and I had the same charge of H335 powder and a 52 grain hollow point, and I wanted to see which of those pieces of brass gave me the best standard deviation. And I know there's better brass out there, but of what I had on hand, the LC and the Hornady gave me the best standard deviation, with the LC brass being at 12.8 feet per second. So then what I did is I went back and I had all LC brass, and I did this test a few days later, and this time I was testing 7 different primers with the same ammo, 55 grain full metal jacket bullet with accurate 2460 powder at 23.2 grains, and I was shooting the same load, the same bullet, the same charge weight, but I had different primers, and I wanted to see which primer gave me the best standard deviation. And the CCI 450 came in at 16.6, and that was the best standard deviation of all of them, with an average velocity of 2,775 feet per second. And so I thought to myself, okay, this is a ball powder, and ball powders work best with Magnum primers, as was demonstrated right here. It's also a very light bullet. So what about a heavier bullet that requires a slower burning pounder for accuracy? So what I did, all right, welcome back. Once again, we're at the Georgia Gun Club's 100-yard indoor rifle range, and I'm continuing my test comparing the velocities of various primers, but today I'm shooting a 73 grain ELD match bullet with 23 grains of CFE223 powder. Here's a photo from the last time we were out, and we were shooting accurate 2460, and what I discovered is that as the barrel was heating up, the velocity was increasing. So we started out with CCI at 2,749 feet per second, and we ended up with Winchester 41 primers producing 2,841 feet per second in velocity. And this was with the same bullet, same powder, and same charge weight. So today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to redo the same test, but using a different bullet and powder. And in order to see if the velocity increases as the barrel heats up, I'm going to shoot these in reverse order. In the past, I've said that I was only checking velocity and I wasn't really interested in group size. This 73 grain bullet with 23 grains of CFE 223 is a bullet, powder, and charge weight that has worked well for me in the past. So I do want to zero in to see which of these primers performs best with this bullet, powder, and charge weight. And from here, once I determine which primer performs the best, then I will move on to seating depth. I'm shooting my Tikka T3X chambered in Remington 223, mounted in an MDT Oryx chassis with an Arkin SH4 6-24x50 rifle scope. So as always, you're welcome to enjoy the music while I fast forward through my shooting, or you can skip forward to the results that follow. Shooting at 100 yards. All right, let's bring them in, see how we did. All right, so on these, the velocity did not necessarily increase as the barrel heated up. And we're shooting in reverse order, so we're at 2457, 2425, 2389, so it's dropping a little bit here. 2401 for the MagTech, 2402 for the Federal Gold Medal, 2443, it did speed up here. The CCI 450 is a Magnum primer, so you would almost expect that to speed up. And then on the CCI 400, we were at 2407. The best standard deviation was with the Federal Gold Medal. We were at 15.3. And as you can see here, all 5 shots are in this one tiny area right here. The CCI 400 was the next best group. The Federal 205 shot pretty well also. And the MagTech was really tight right here too. So we will take these home, measure these with the Hornady Ballistics app, and get back to you with the details on the velocities, the standard deviations, extreme spreads, and group statistics. All right, so stay tuned. As this load has performed well for me in the past, it's a 73 grain ELD match with CFE223 powder at 23 grains. And this is supposed to be, according to the book, pushing about 2,500 feet per second in velocity. I didn't have quite that good, but we did okay with it. Now, I'm very pleased with how this set of targets came out. And this has been a good load for me in the past, but I wanted to see with that load at that charge weight, how did the different primers affect velocity? I'm also, in this case, I'm also shooting for group as well. Not just checking velocity, but because this is a load that I'm trying to zero in on, the 73 grain ELD with the CFE 223, I wanted to see which primers actually would perform best with this particular powder. Now, on the last test, when I shot these, I started with a CCI 400, moved to the 450, then Federal, then MagTech, and so forth. So from start to finish, I went from left to right, top to bottom. Now, I noticed that the velocities were increasing as you went along here. 2749, 2775, 2788, hovered there around 2787, then 2806, ended up at 2841. So I shot these the same, except I started with the Winchester, then went to the Gen X, then to the Federal, and they're shown in the exact same order on the target, but we shot them in backwards order. Here's another thing too. You see this little orange arc that I've drawn here? What that is, that's where I had to reload or change magazines. And so there was a little break there where the barrel was able to cool down. Now, what I have here is I'm shooting 5-shot groups each, but I've got a 10-shot magazine. So to save time reloading and switching, what I do is on these first 2 targets, I first load the one with the Gen X primer in there first, those 5, and then I put the Winchester 41 on top of that. So when it's time to shoot, I shoot the 5 Winchester 41, which are first in the magazine. Then I move on after 5 shots, and then I shoot the Gen X. Now, you have to keep count because it's easy to get messed up, but I didn't this time. Every one of these targets has 5 shots. So that's what I did. So I had one magazine shooting 2 targets, and after that magazine, I had a second magazine loaded and ready to go. So there was a brief break in here between swapping magazines, but towards the end, I had to stop and reload again. And you see a change in the velocity when there's a break like that, reloading or changing magazines. Now, on all of these, when you see the close-up of my target, you'll see that I have drawn a blue line between the 2 most extreme shots, and I put a little tang on each one of those. And then where the average center of that group is, there's a red cross there. And then I've also indicated the extreme spread, the mean radius in the area, and also for the velocity, the average velocity for those 5 shots, the extreme spread, and the standard deviation. And I've done that for all of these. On this particular Winchester 41, I've returned a bunch of those because of failures to fire and got a refund back on the unused part of a pack. And I had a problem with this where it was just like one of these rounds, when it blew, it just was like somebody going in your face. And fortunately, that's what your shroud is for on your bolt. So when you have a rupture in a primer like that and it shoots those gases back through the firing pin and back towards you, that shroud deflects that. So you feel the air from it, but you don't get any of the burn from any of the powder or any of that. So anyway, that was quite an experience, one that I don't really want to have happen again. But the primer looked okay, other than it was just punctured. Starting off with the Winchester number 41, this is actually an AR primer. We did eventually get all 5 of these to fire. And we had an extreme spread of 0.71, a mean radius of 0.30, and it covered an area of 0.34. These are all pretty much shooting a little bit high and a little bit to the left. So this one is 0.55 to the left is where the group is centering, and about a ½ inch high at 0.49. Okay, so on the Winchester 41, this was my cold barrel group. This was the first group I was shooting. This also happened to be the fastest because it had an average velocity of 2,457 feet per second, getting pretty close to that 2,500 rated velocity. An extreme spread of 54.3, but a standard deviation of 20.1. So not great, but nevertheless still not a bad group, because on the extreme spread it was only 0.71 inches with a mean radius of 0.30. And if you take the height of the group and multiply that times the width, we had an area of 0.34 inches. So not bad at all. All right, with the Gen X primers, these shot pretty well also, although this was probably my worst performing group, but it still is not bad because it's shooting a little bit left and a little bit high, 0.26 inches above the point of aim and 0.82 inches to the left. It had an extreme spread of 0.98, a mean radius of 0.42, and covered an area of 0.6 inches. The velocity is settling down a little bit. Our first group was at 2457. This group is at 2425 average with an extreme spread of 87.8 and a standard deviation of 33.1. So this was actually the worst performing group of the day. The Federal 205 did pretty good. It's shooting 0.75 inches to the left and 0.22 inches high. We had an extreme spread of 0.77 with a mean radius of 0.23. And as I've said before, a radius is half of a circle. So if you multiply that, that gives you an average group size of 0.46. So pretty good shooting, I would say, but that's a really tight group right there. And it covers an area of 0.35 inches. Now, between the Gen X and the 205, I had to swap magazines here. So that gave us a little bit of a break. So the barrel seems to be cooling down just a little bit because the velocity has dropped now from 2425 to 2390. So it's dropped 35 feet per second. The extreme spread is 61 and the standard deviation is 20.3. With the MagTech primers, we're still shooting to the left at 0.71, but only 0.09 inches high. We have an extreme spread with this group. This is a really tight group right here. It covers an area of only 0.31 inches, but we've got an extreme spread of 0.58 and a mean radius of 0.28, which would give you an average group size of 0.56, which is pretty close to the extreme spread of 0.58. But the velocity on this was 2401, and the velocity is actually increasing by 11 feet per second because that barrel again is warming up. So this one's at 2401, an extreme spread of 47.6, but a standard deviation of 17.3. Okay, and then I had to reload between the MagTech and the Federal Gold Medal Match I had to take time to stop and reload because my magazines were empty. So we started off here with a cooler barrel. We're still shooting to the left and a little bit high, 0.84 inches to the left and 0.13 high. We've got an extreme spread of just 0.43 inches on 5 shots, a mean radius of 0.18, which gives you an average group size of 0.36. And it's covering an area of 0.08 inches. If you look at this close up right here, you see the pencil lines. This group is 0.21 inches wide and 0.39 inches tall. When you multiply those two numbers, it gives you an area of 0.08. So an extremely tight group there, all touching. The average velocity on this was 2403. The extreme spread was 40.6, and it had a standard deviation of 15.3. So this was, by all measures, our best group of the day. So the federal gold medal is where I'm going to be focusing my attention with this load. And the next thing we're going to be doing is seating depth. But let's finish this with a CCI 450. That one also shot very well. Now, it did have an extreme spread of 0.91 inches because we have kind of a flyer up here off to the side, but a mean radius of 0.39, covering an area of 0.57 inches. The velocity is 2443, and the extreme spread is 63 feet per second, and the standard deviation of 20. Our second best group of the day was the CCI 400. This one had an extreme spread of 0.52, a mean radius of 0.18, which would give you an average group size of 0.36, and it covers an area of just 0.17 inches. You look at that, look how tight that is. Those are pretty much all touching. This one and this one are off by to itself, but that is a really tight group. The velocity on this was 2408. We had an extreme spread of 55.9 with a standard deviation of 19.8. So that 2,400 foot velocity seems to be the sweet spot for this bullet, because at 2408 we've got a group of 0.52, at 2403 we've got a group of 0.43, and at 2401 we've got a group of 0.58. So it seems to be something magic about that velocity there. I'm very pleased with how this load performed. If you take all of these primers and you average them together, the thing that's one thing that stands out to me is out of 7 groups, all 7 were under an inch. The largest we had was 98 hundredths of an inch with a mean radius of 0.42, but it had a standard deviation of 33.1. That was our worst standard deviation and also the worst grouping. But if you take all of these and average them all together, so I went and averaged all of the data from all of the targets, and I drew this target here on the side. We had an average point of impact that was 0.78 inches to the left and a 1/4 inch high right here. Our mean radius was 0.28 inches. So from the point of impact measuring out 0.28 inches, this circle gives you your average group size, which is 0.56 inches. The extreme spread was 0.7 inches, and so we have a line here showing where the 2 furthest points apart from each other would be. I drew those at a 45-degree angle, and then I measured the height of the group and the width of the group, and it's 0.55 times 0.55, which gives you a group of 0.3 inches. So a 0.70 extreme spread, 0.28 mean radius, an area of 0.30. The average velocity of all of these bullets averaged 2418 with an extreme spread of 58.6 and a standard deviation of 20.8. And this is how they all shake out when you put them together and average them up. All right, so we've got a winner here today. It's going to be the Federal Gold Medal Match Primer. So that's what I'm going to use to develop this load with the 73 grain ELD match bullets and the CFE223 powder. All right, so the next step is going to be working on seating depth. I'm already working on those videos, so that will be coming soon, and we're going to see if we can get this 0.43 inch group even tighter. If you have any ideas, thoughts, questions, suggestions, please leave those in the comments below. I try to interact with everybody that comments, although thanks to you guys, it's getting harder every day because I'm getting a lot of comments on these videos, and just want to say thank you for that. I hope you will like, share, and subscribe, and thanks for watching.